To call that game ugly is an understatement. And I mean the weather, I mean the gameplay, I mean everything. The Pittsburgh Steelers tie the winless Detroit Lions, who remain winless, but we don't get to see our first ever 0-17 team in the NFL, as 0-16 is the best they could offer. The Lions pick up the tie. The Steelers fall to a tie, and Pittsburgh now 5-3-1, a 16-16 tie with Detroit. This our Steelers postgame show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Steelers Now. Head over to Steelers Now for all our postgame coverage, our game recap, and the video reaction here on PSL. I'm your host, as always, Mike Asti, and I'm going to be joined by Josh Carney. He's joined us before. He is over the Beaver County Times and also Steelers Depot, as we try to make some sense of this game. Again, the Steelers tie Detroit 16-16. And Josh, yeah, it's a tie. It really feels like a loss, but it's not a loss. So they still kind of are in the driver's seat into the division based on what's happened with the Ravens, Browns, and Bengals throughout the country and in the NFL. And this is one of those games that Mason Rudolph starts, Ben can't go. Mason Rudolph opened things up with a pretty solid touchdown drive. It looked like, okay, they're going to be fine. This is the lowly Lions. Then kind of the wheels fell off. The offense couldn't really get moving. The passing game couldn't work. Either he would miss passes or the receivers would not catch a pass when it was finally right in their direction. Najee Harris did get over 100, did have 4 yards per carry, didn't get in the end zone though. And defensively, the Steelers only allowed the 16. They kind of played okay, but they also allowed gaping holes that allowed the Lions to run right through them despite having their running back not available in this game. So what happened in this game to lead us in the direction that it ended up being a tie in overtime? The Steelers were even lucky to actually tie and not lose this game.
It's just another classic case of the Steelers shooting themselves in the foot. I mean, tackling issues again cropped up. Mike Tomlin after the game said that, he didn't want to take anything away from the Lions' ability to run the football on Sunday, but a number of missed tackles in this one, very similar to the Seattle game. Offensively, they got away from what worked in the first 15 plays. I mean, obviously that's scripted, so I'm sure Mason Rudolph felt very comfortable going into that.
Sure.
But to ask that guy to throw the ball 50 times in an overtime game in those conditions,
right.
When you've got Najee Harris having the success he had on the ground, I'm raising some eyebrows at Matt Canada. Maybe not some situational play calls. Maybe aside from the goal to go situation there where Mason Rudolph missed Ray McLeod on an easy layup throw. It was sloppy all around. It was a very confusing game. It felt like it set football back 50 years. I mean, just, blooper reel after blooper reel. I think the Steelers they tried to get a little too cute offensively and defensively. I don't want to say they were lax in their preparation or anything like that. I think that they just sometimes effort wasn't there, and it turned ugly. Detroit had a lot of success. Momentum was on their side, and any given Sunday is a saying for a reason. And fortunately, the Steelers didn't lose this one, so they don't get a game in the loss column. But a tie in this situation, Mike, definitely feels like a loss. And it's a similar feeling I had after the Monday night game where it was like, yeah, you beat the Bears, but I mean,
you let the Bears come back. You kind of toy with Seattle for a while, and that was Seattle with Geno Smith. The Steelers have been winning recently and been building a little bit of a winning streak, and obviously leading the division and feeling like maybe they're able to take control of this division too, with again what's happening around the country with the Bengals, the Browns, and the Ravens in the division in particular. They're having bad days. They're losing those games. The Bengals losing back-to-back to teams that are going to be missing the playoffs. But it doesn't also make you too great about the team. Kind of like when they were 11-0 last year. That maybe was some fool's gold. They were facing teams that weren't that good. They were backup quarterbacks. They weren't blowing anybody out. They were winning, and it's the NFL. Winning is the most important thing. They did win these games recently. They didn't win this one. They didn't lose this one, but they didn't win it either. And maybe the chickens are coming to the roost after seeing what happened against the Bears, Seattle, etc. And Dan Campbell and Jared Goff both, they feel like they should have won the game. They're not happy with a tie at all. They both were making it very clear. They feel like they blew a chance to win this game, and they didn't take advantage of the Steelers' miscues enough. I think also maybe what we have to point out here, and what I'm sure Steelers fans are frustrated with, Dan Campbell and the Lions, that he took over the play calling for this game the first time in his career he's done so. were very open with what they were doing. It was clear. It was a run first team. It was going to be a ground and pound team. They actually said they wanted to mirror what the Steelers were going to do and basically play Steeler football. And that's without Jamal Williams, who was inactive for this game, missing his second straight. They didn't care. So I didn't really get an answer. I did actually ask, well, what did you see in the Steelers besides just the weather that made you want to just ground and pound? Because the Steelers haven't allowed too many 100-yard rushers this year. And they just kind of danced around it, but I do kind of still wonder that. But it granted, it worked. It led them to this tie. They should have maybe won. They got a 100-yard rusher on the ground, 60-plus rusher on the ground. They were right there with what the Steelers were doing with Najee Harris. And you would think when you have a one-dimensional team that's so obvious, your quarterback had 40 yards going into the third quarter, that you'd be able to scheme and stop them. Minka did have an interception taken away off a call. The Steelers did kind of have things taken away when they would get momentum going on defense, but it is one of those games that despite only allowing the 16, it feels like it wasn't the best of day for the defense either. Josh Carney here joining me on our Steelers postgame show. The Steelers tie Detroit. Yes, you heard it here. They tie Detroit. I am not wrong. They have tied the Detroit Lions. Josh Carney of the Beaver County Times and Steelers Depot. And Josh, how would you evaluate Mason Rudolph's performance here? Because I think if we're dishing out a piece of the pie in terms of blame, he's definitely missed some throws. He's definitely part of this. There were a couple of drives, certainly when they set up for a field goal, it maybe could have been a touchdown, etc. If you would have scored there, that would have clearly won this game with the way this game unfolded. You do have to be real. He is a backup quarterback. He only knew he was officially going to start last night. He had been practicing all week long, again, with Dwayne Haskins, who has been inactive all season long. It's similar, Mason, to me, from what he was against the Browns, where he's good enough to maybe win you a game or two. He's a backup. He's probably not, the future of the franchise. But I think also the problem for me is the first drive's fine with the scripted plays, 30 completions, 200-plus passing yards, a touchdown. Yeah, you don't want the pick, 70-plus percentage on or 70-plus on a quarterback rating. That's backup stuff. It's certainly mirrored what Jared Goff did. But 50 pass attempts when Najee has 4 per carry feels like that also goes to the game plan that I don't think Ben, you would win this game with 50 pass attempts either. That's not the strategy with Ben. So why is it with Mason Rudolph?
Yeah, I'm just not entirely sure. I mean, that's what I went back to what I said earlier. I think Matt Canada just got a little too cute. Obviously, the Lions secondary is suspect at this point. I mean, they have some talent at cornerback, but for goodness sakes, Mark Gilbert was on the Steelers practice squad and he made the play of the game with a punch out after getting beat by Deontay Johnson. But I don't know what it is. I think they feel more comfortable pushing the football down the field with Mason Rudolph because he has, at this point, for all intents and purposes, a better arm than Ben Roethlisberger. But seeing
deep ball wise, you could say that.
Right. Yeah. But seeing the success that Najee Harris and that offensive line, which hats off to them. They had both starting guards out with injuries.
Yeah.
And they were still able to run the football against Detroit. You would think in conditions like that, where it's raining at times, it was sleet coming down, it was below 40. That's an old school Steelers style football game where you run the ball 40 times and just grind them out. It's very confusing. I know that Mike Tomlin said after the game, there were some situations where there were RPOs in place and Mason saw something he liked, which led to some pass attempts. I think they just got too cute, Mike. Honestly, I think they just got too cute and tried to overthink it in some situations, and they're paying for it. But again, Mason didn't lose them the game, but he also didn't elevate them to a win. Now, if Deontay Johnson doesn't fumble that football on that long catch in overtime, we're talking about Mason Rudolph leading the Steelers to an overtime win, regardless of how ugly it was. But fact of the matter is they tied the Lions, and people are just going to look at Mason Rudolph's stat line and say, hey, he wasn't good enough. And no, I wouldn't argue with it.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say Mason Rudolph wasn't good enough. But again, he was equal to Jared Goff. He was asked to do a lot more than Jared Goff was asked to do based on just the 50 pass attempts here, even though a similar game plan maybe should have been employed or kind of was. It just didn't work out. And the score was what it was. It was Steelers football all the way around, but Mason threw 50 passes. That's kind of weird. I don't think if anyone would have told you 16-16 tie the Lions, how many pass attempts does Mason Rudolph have? You're probably figuring, 23? Like over-under might have been 25. Ends up with doubling that up at 50, goes 30 for 50. And he missed some receivers, but at the end there, Deontay Johnson trying to do too much, ends up fumbling the football. And at minimum, that's a field goal by Boswell. even if you do nothing else in the drive. That's why you're saying that would have basically probably been a game-winning drive for the Steelers. They then would win at 19-16, which wouldn't be impressive, but would be better than the tie here. Josh Carney again joining me here on our Steelers post-game show. Now, Josh, what do you think the fix is defensively, and what has this exposed about the Steelers defensively? Because, again, they've been allowing yards to some of these backup quarterbacks. Jared Goff, obviously a starter. He's starting a Super Bowl, but I don't think anyone thinks he's a Pro Bowler. And, yeah, it's only 16 points, but the Lions were moving the ball, especially on the ground, wide open holes. Is that just fundamentals for this game where they somehow got away from them? Or is this an overlying theme that the Steelers, who are stereotypically known as this defense that does not allow teams to run against them, that maybe that's a thing of the past? Maybe that's a false narrative, because in this game, they certainly offered wide open holes, and any running back in the country would have been able to pick up yards against the Steelers defense.
I think it's a combination of things, Mike. Obviously, Stephon Tuitt hasn't played all year. Tyson Alualu is on injured reserve. You've got guys like Henry Mondu, Isaiah Buggs, Isaiah Loudermilk out there trying to hold down the fort and give the Steelers meaningful reps next to Cameron Hayward. And, you know, when Hayward's your only threat along the defensive line, you're going to tend to run away from him and run at some of these other guys that don't have the experience. And when they're able to do that, they're also able to get to the second level and get hats on linebackers like Joe Schobert and Devin Bush. And that's why you saw those huge lanes. Yeah. I know everybody's crushing Devin Bush after this game, and rightfully so. You know, there were some really ugly reps from him, but everyone.
Did he get mentioned on the broadcast? I actually asked that during the game. I didn't get to hear it, obviously.
Yes, they were talking. Okay. Yeah, Daryl Johnston was talking about him quite a bit. Was questioning his effort and what he was seeing at times. But you know, everyone wants to make Devin Bush out to be Ryan Shazier because of his draft. You know, his draft positioning and all that, and he's just not. He needs a clean area to work in, and when linemen get to the second level on him, it's pretty much over. The easy answer is health. I mean, some of it is fundamentals. You know, Cameron Hayward's talked in the past about we just weren't staying in our gaps, and I don't think that was the case here today. But I think it's really just health, and they gotta get some guys back healthy and back on the field. And I'm kind of a little frustrated to see that they could have had Fletcher Cox for a third-round pick, because you add that guy to that front seven, I don't think you're having some of these run game issues defensively right now.
I think this game really did show they're definitely missing Stephon Tuitt. Still an unknown with when or if he'll rejoin this team at all this year. And then also this game is one of those reasons why I do get trading Melvin Ingram. He didn't want to be there. He's complaining. He asked for a trade. You don't want that guy around in any walk of life, any business, if someone vocally doesn't want to be with you. But this kind of is an argument why you just tell them to put up or shut up, you're getting paid, because they did definitely need somebody else there. They needed all hands on deck, and there's no rule that you have to capitulate to a trade request. They did, but...
And now TJ Watt is hurt and needs to be further evaluated.
So. Right. So again, if TJ Watt misses games, and it really looked bad at the time, I thought he might have been done for the year with that knee on knee for TJ Watt there. And if he is, obviously the season's officially done. If TJ Watt's done, the Steelers are done. So yeah, and that would expose that even further. You'd like to have Melvin Ingram there, and you could talk about the offseason another time, but not having him this year at all certainly makes that an issue here. Josh Carney, Steelers postgame show. Again, he's coming at me from the Beaver County Times and also Steelers Depot. Pittsburgh ties this game with Detroit. Again, they didn't lose, but they do tie this game. And again, 5-3-1 is certainly better than 5-4, certainly in terms of playoff positioning, certainly in terms of this division, certainly in terms of what's happening with the rest of the AFC North as well. They do have the Chargers Sunday Night Football coming up. It's another primetime game. It's another late one for the Steelers. That's going to be traveling across the country against a contending team. And then you have the division. Then you have the Bengals and Ravens, and you obviously got to win those games. Obviously, it sounds simple to ask what needs changed, because a lot does need changed in this game. Ben is going to be a question mark, regular health, but the whole COVID deal will certainly be more unraveled, I imagine, this coming week. So what are your keys to that game against the Chargers in particular? And what do the Steelers really need to change? Is it more of a focus on trying to open things up on offense and making sure that you administer the offense properly, regardless of who's the quarterback? Is it more of a focus on defense and just fundamental tackling? Is it everything? What does this team need to do to not allow this season totally get away from them, even though they're kind of still in the driver's seat despite the tie?
So I know coming off the Seattle game where they had just a dreadful tackling performance, the run defense was a point of emphasis all week. And granted, they had a bye week to get prepared for the Browns game. And if you recall, they shut down the Browns rushing attack. The Chargers rushing attack certainly isn't on that level, but Austin Eckler is a very good running back. I am assuming that they are going to focus heavily on stopping the run.
This is a blueprint,
tackling,
right?
Yeah, tackling this week. Yeah. You take that away. Justin Herbert's a great quarterback. They have a ton of weapons. Keenan Allen. Obviously, Mike Williams is having a great year. I'm a little concerned if Joe Hayden can't go in that game, just because that would elevate James Pierre into a full-time role. But offensively, I just don't know much can change at this point. It all depends, obviously, Kevin Dotson's health, Trey Turner's health. Kevin Dotson was rolled out very quickly in this one after he came limping off the field and was
right.
But I think you just have to get back to an emphasis of Najee Harris has to touch the ball 30, 35 times in this one. Like it's very clear this offense runs through him at this point. As he goes, this offense goes.
Sure.
I'd really like to not see 50 pass attempts, even
from anyone.
From anyone, right? I prefer not to see 50 pass attempts, but run successfully early, you'll run successfully late, and I think you have to emphasize running the football on Sunday Night Football and stopping the run. And I think that's how this team has to win. They have to win very ugly. It's almost 2015 Denver Broncos-ish in a sense, where it's like you're very handicapped offensively, but you can run the football and stop the run. Aside from that, just hope that some of these post-game injuries are nothing serious and these key guys can play on Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, and that Denver team, when Peyton Manning was hurt and he had his 9 TD, 17 interception year that really, really wasn't good, they were able to win a championship because the defense was such a beast. They were getting so many big plays defensively, kind of what the Steelers did a couple years ago, and the running game was just really driving the bus for the Denver Broncos. It is kind of weird to say that the Pittsburgh Steelers need to correct and refocus and get back to stopping the run and running the football, especially here as we transition from fall to winter, because that's old school Steeler football. That's what they always have been doing, no matter who's the personnel. And that's what some years ago thought they were doing too much of with a modern day NFL, where you need to score 25, 30, 35 points to compete. The Steelers need to really get back to it. I don't know if they need to turn back the clock, but they need to do more of that. Certainly when your best overall player on offense, if not the team, is Najee Harris not touching enough. So that's pretty clear. This game just didn't go the way they wanted at all. And I think that strategy is going to have to be similar against the Chargers, despite Hobart being the most dynamic quarterback they're probably going to face, certainly Lamar Jackson too, but also against the Bengals, certainly against the Ravens, Joe Burrow. I mean, actually, they're facing 3 dynamic quarterbacks coming up, feeling more dynamic than they were facing Jared Goff. So maybe you'll see more from those teams passing. But there's a lot to fix here for sure. What's your feeling? Just lastly, what's your feeling about this Steelers team in comparison to the rest of the NFL? Because while the Steelers tied, while the Steelers have a lot to work on, while they didn't look great in this game at all, the Bengals have certainly been exposed. The Ravens don't nearly look as great as they were. The Browns are completely in flux. OBJ gone, Baker Mayfield going back to what maybe he was a while ago. That last week game maybe was a flash and not reality for them. They lose. The Steelers again are right there, but it also appears that maybe almost right there by default. Maybe there's not that many elite teams around the league, and it really is all going to come down to those divisional games, I'd imagine.
Yeah, 100%. Coming into the year, I thought the AFC North would be rather rough overall just because they would all beat each other up. But now it's kind of just like they're all mediocre teams at this point. Obviously, the Ravens are dealing with a ton of injuries. The Browns are kind of showing their true colors. I think the Bengals were getting a little bit too much hype early on, and it kind of got to their head a bit. But I don't think that there's an elite team in the AFC right now, honestly. I know Buffalo has looked like it at times, but I mean, they also lost to the Jaguars and the Steelers team.
They finally did against the Jets, but it is the Jets. It is the Jets, right?
Right. They ended the Mike White experience, it feels like. But, the Steelers are definitely in the thick of things when it comes to the AFC North race. I think that division is very winnable. I would not write the Steelers off when it comes to that, but
can the Steelers win this division with Mason Rudolph? Hypothetically, obviously Ben's just a COVID protocol. It's not like a serious injury. Ben could return next week, and you certainly would need him. But if it is Mason Rudolph as the starter for even another game or a chunk of games or a significant amount of games. He is the QB2. Haskins clearly is not bumping him off for that QB2 spot, no matter what anybody may dream or may want. Can Mason Rudolph be good enough from what you've now seen, lead this team based on knowing what's going on around the NFL and the fact that, you know, he had too many pass attempts, so maybe you need to fix that. But is Mason Rudolph good enough to lead this team to the postseason if it has to be him?
No, I don't think so. And I it's not all entirely on him. If this defense was fully healthy, I'd say, yeah, I think they can. But he just doesn't do enough to elevate that offense. And that offense needs to do more than what it's doing right now. But I think the Steelers are a fringe playoff team right now. They have to win the AFC North to get in. If they don't, I can't see them being a playoff team. And boy, would that be a whimper to the end of the Ben Roethlisberger era.
Yeah, that would be the end of the Ben Roethlisberger era, the end of an era in general. And it certainly would put a season that there was, I don't want to say hype, but there was a lot of effort put in by Kevin Colbert and alike to make this a season that was all about winning now. They were in win now mode, as made sense to be. But then you'd be in a situation where you didn't win now, your future is in doubt, you're in flux at many key positions, you don't know what's going on, and you're kind of changing the guard in terms of era. So it would definitely change the theme of the offseason, to say the very least. And it's kind of funny. It's too bad this Mason Rudolph, that certainly is better than where he was a couple years ago, wasn't there a couple years ago with that defense, or that defense with this Mason Rudolph. Even without Ben, that feels like that would at least crawl into a 7 spot for a playoff appearance, because you now have that one extra spot you didn't have a couple years ago. Josh, I appreciate the time. Maybe we'll try to get you back on with a less asinine game to discuss here as the Steelers do tie the Lions 16-16. Also apologize everybody watching this now, as it was ugly with the weather. It was ugly on the field. It was a freaking tie, and the live connection didn't work. So I couldn't include the chat. I couldn't include the fans here. We couldn't go live. So we're going to throw this up on the channel and the site nonetheless. We had to do this nonetheless, but it was just one of those days. Nobody won. I feel like
the football gods said no, that you're not doing this live. So
they did. Nobody won. We didn't get a victory. The Steelers didn't get a victory. The Lions freaking didn't get a victory. We're going to close this day with everybody taking a tie, I guess, is whatever that may feel for you.